joining us today for our second virtual Lunch and Learn. We will be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the current exhibition, the Salina Biennial, which is now open to the public in our galleries through June 28th. Our public hours are Wednesday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can find more information about this exhibition in our public hours on our Facebook page and on our website. But I encourage everyone to come in and see this exhibition before it comes down. It's some really, really incredible work. My name is Gretchen Boyum, the Director of Exhibitions and Programs here at the Art Center. And today we are joined by Biennial artist and recipient of the Kevin Mullins Memorial Award, Colette Copeland. Colette Copeland is a multimedia visual artist whose work examines issues surrounding gender, death, and contemporary culture. Sourcing personal narratives in popular media, she utilizes video, photography, performance, and sculptural installation to question societal roles and the pervasive influence of media and technology on our communal and enculturation. Her videos employ experimental techniques and absurdist humor to explore the landscape of human relationships. She received her BFA from Pratt Institute in New York and her MFA from Syracuse University. Her work has been exhibited all over the world in solo and group exhibitions. And she currently teaches art and digital media at the University of Texas and Collin Colleges in Dallas, Texas. Today we'll be focusing on her project, which one of the films is included in our exhibition, the Victorian Woman and the Man series, which she had started in 2012. I'm going to let Colette tell us a little bit more about this series and give us some background before we watch the videos. But, thank you for joining us today, Colette. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you, Gretchen. I'm honored to be part of the Biennial and very honored to receive the Kevin Mullins Award. So the work that you are about to see, it spans 6 years of various pieces. The second piece that you will see, which is called Tangible Intent, was actually the second in the series. And to back up a little bit, I moved to Texas from the Northeast in 2011, and the culture was very, very different. And so the alter ego of the Victorian woman, she first came out in Philadelphia when I was living there as a response to an early Thomas Edison film. And then when I moved, I thought it was time for her to come out of the closet again, so to speak. And so it was by adopting this alter ego, it was a way of interacting with the Texas culture. Specifically, I was interested in activities that would have been deemed masculine. There is very much a mythology, not just in the Northeast, but around the world. When I travel, Texas is really, people think of cowboys in the Wild West. So there are a few rules. The Victorian woman, when she is performing, she's always in full costume. She never trains for the performances. In the case of the guns, she did. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I don't want to give it away, but there was a 15-minute tutorial for that. And the Victorian woman she's a metaphor. And an absurdist spectacle, humorous way to deconstruct gendered stereotypes. So I hope you enjoy. We're going to see, she's going to wrestle the man, and the man is in all caps. It's only you're only going to see an excerpt. It's the first period of what would be a freestyle wrestling match. There are 3 periods. If anybody wants to see, what happens in the other 2 periods, you can email me and I'll send you links. And then you'll see the tangible intent second. And then the last one, which is on exhibit at the Art Center, is bearding. And that was as well as you'll see the final piece. But the second half of that, we did film live in an actual beard contest. So that part was not, it's the real deal. She did compete, in that contest in North Texas, and you'll see what happens from there. So thank you for joining us. And I'm thrilled to get your questions afterwards.
Right. Thank you, Colette. Yeah, we will be looking at first the Victorian woman wrestles the man, then tangible intent, and then bearding. And I just want to let everyone know that as we're watching these videos, if you have questions, please submit them, and then we will ask them to Colette when we are finished with the videos. But let me load these up. All right. All right. All right. Colette, can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, that was really wonderful. So thank you for sharing those with us. I think we do. Oh, I don't know if we have any questions yet. So again, a reminder to everyone watching, if you have questions for Colette, please submit them, and she would love to answer them for us. I do have a couple of questions that we can start off with. One was kind of particular to the man, and I know you could talk a little bit more about, because he has collaborated with you throughout this process, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I love that his title is capitalized, or his name is capitalized within the title. If you could talk a little bit more about this character and why you're using that capitalization.
Sure. Well, the man was not meant to be a particular individual, but I would say an accumulation of white hegemonic power, right? So white supremacy, white patriarchy. So it was meant to be, institutional in terms government, institutional. The fact that white man rules the world. It's interesting to see this piece so many years later. I think it's very salient in the moment that we're living in, when race issues are, so much in the news, and, there's been so much talk about the race problem in the US, and, what can we do, to be a part, to be activists to effectively change that in the US. And so I think that, that plays a part, because it is certainly about, specifically to the US, power, who holds the power, who makes the decisions.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it does really kind of comment on what is our current political and activist atmosphere, I think, with looking at the man. I have a couple questions coming in from Lori. She has a phrase kind of like things I'm thinking about now, and these are some things I think that really stand out within the videos. And we can kind of pick them apart. So the physicality of the videos, and I think we've talked a little bit about that in our previous conversations too. But if you wanted to kind of address that, I know, especially, particularly the wrestling one, which is very physical, and we can hear you guys both breathing, and at the end, it is apparent that the man is sweating, and you both look like you worked very hard. But can you talk a little bit about the physical aspect of that?
Sure. So in the history of performance art, there is, I guess, a subgenre of performance as endurance, performance as task. And so, and I'll back up a minute, because sometimes people will say, well, what is the difference between performance art or acting or theater? And it's very different. In theater, there is a script. It's performed the same way for an audience every night. It is it's not real. And performance art is real. So although we are adopting these characters, it is very much, and I should say nothing was scripted at all. We did take about 15 minutes before we filmed to go through some wrestling moves. My son was a wrestler, and so he coached on a few different things. But then when the bell went off, Adam, like, he totally didn't do anything that we talked about we might do, right? He said he heard the bell, his testosterone kicked in, and then he went at her, and the, so it's really important that the realness factor, and that this idea of embodiment, that the experience is embodied in our physical bodies. And I always say, like, I'm willing to suffer for my art, but not that much. That one was it was really tough. It was really tough. I fractured my cheekbone. I know Adam couldn't walk very well the next day. We were both pretty spent, but like I said, that was part of it. And also we knew that there was a limited time, right? So we used the rules of the universal wrestling match, and so there were no multiple takes, right? So you do it and then you do it. And then I think, to answer your question, the physicality, it really is important for the character. And as we get into tangible intent and also bearding, where the shift is a little bit different, and it is about the Victorian woman experiencing masculine aspects of Texas culture. And then, so that had to be real and authentic as well, and physically embodied. I think in order or otherwise the experience wouldn't be authentic.
Right. And watching actually the tangible intent, I think I felt the physicality of it more even than the wrestling one, because, your whole body is tense and then it is shaking and moving. That looked like it was really difficult to me as well.
Yeah, the first one I did was Archery, and Dakota Taylor, who filmed Tangible Intent, also filmed the first one, which was Archery. And I say that my opportunities come from people I meet. And Dakota Taylor was a student of mine at Richland College. I found out he was a champion archer. He was also a dynamite camera man. And so we did the first one at his, archery studio and filmed there. And then he came and he filmed for the Tangible Intent. And the Tangible Intent, I had another student at Collin College who was a former sniper for the Marines. And so after the semester was over, I said, would you consider being a gun trainer for this? And when I asked him, I said, he goes, well, what kind of guns do you want to shoot? I have everything, tell me what you want to use. And I said, well, again, I'm willing to suffer, but not that much. So I said, is there a gun that would bruise my collarbone but not break it? And he said 12 gauge shotgun. So we also did a version with the 12 gauge shotgun, and that was a lot more physical, and I did have a pretty bad bruise from that. But shooting the AR, I think it's so loud and you feel the vibration. So it really becomes very physical, because all of that sound and vibration, really does manifest itself in the body. I'm not going to lie, shooting the AR was super fun, but I have a lot of conflicted feelings about gun culture, and especially gun culture in Texas, where there are little to no regulations. Anybody can go, buy a gun. You don't need a license. You can carry in your car without a license. I was in a Sportsman Cabela's, which is a sports shop that sells guns and outdoor wear, the other day for another project. And there was a huge line, about 50 people in line waiting to buy guns. So since all of this has been going on, gun sales are through the roof, not just in Texas, but, everywhere, which again, that piece was shot in 2012, and 8 years later, it just takes on a whole different meaning, I think.
All right. Thank you, Colette. I think we'll move a little bit more specifically into bearding. And I know Lori has some questions about that. She asks about the concept of consent and complicity, and shame in the bearding piece. And I think there's some of the physical aspect involved in that as well, because like the Victorian woman is when she is shaved, she is doing this act upon the man, which I feel like compared to the other videos is kind of different for her. But I will let you talk more about that.
Sure. So I like the terminology. It was consent, complicity, and shame, right? When we had talked about that, well, first I'll back up. The bearding culture, which is not unique to Texas, it really is worldwide. There are beard clubs in every city around the country and around the world, and there are competitions. And so when I first found out about that, I was really curious. As a masculine subculture, but also that they always have a category for female beards, and the female competitors are called whiskerinas. And so it's not my first project that I've done with hair. I've been interested in hair and the symbolism surrounding hair. For example, when hair is on your head, a sign of beauty, certainly in the feminine culture, the female culture. But also if it's not on your head, there's the idea of you find a stray hair somewhere, there's this kind of visceral ooh factor with it. I was thinking about the story in the Bible about Samson and Delilah, and where she cuts off his hair as a way to, strip him of his masculinity. And so at this point, Adam had grown his beard. I knew I wanted to compete in the beard competition, and he had grown his beard out for about 6 months. And so when we talked about the project and what happens if the Victorian woman takes his beard away, and does that strip him of his masculinity, and symbolically allowing once his is gone, hers then it has permission to grow. And so I think as a metaphor, this idea, ultimately, I think in relationships, thinking about egalitarian or some sort of equal balance of power, right? You are always negotiating. And, when relationships go awry, it's usually because there is an imbalance of power. So part of it was looking at not necessarily, or how can you break out of those traditional gendered roles? So in terms of complicity and consent, obviously he had to consent as well as be complicit in his own demasculinization, so to speak. And if you noticed in the wrestling, even though she won in the end, he took her hair and had it on his belt loop as a trophy. Like he took her pelt, so to speak, right? And the trophy was on his side. So we were thinking also a little bit about that as well. And then I guess, shame. Yeah. So it was originally he asked me if I would shave him with a straight razor. I was like, I don't think first of all, the Victorian woman is not skilled enough to do that with a straight razor. And I was like, he goes, yeah, but I think it would be better for the video. And I go, I just can't risk slicing, your throat. So, we, and again, we couldn't practice because that would go against the, tenets of the Victorian woman. You have to be in the moment, and you don't script it, and you don't write all of that. So, the two parts were shot on separate days. I will say, in terms of shaming, the actual day of the beard competition, the man felt very threatened and uncomfortable, which was interesting because, 95% of the people at the competition are men. However, once some of them found out that the Victorian woman had shaved his beard. They were like, dude, how could you let a woman touch your beard? That's just so wrong. And then some people didn't realize that we were filming. They thought we were having an actual struggle. And then they were like, dude, don't lay your hands on a woman. So in terms of shaming or just feeling really out of place in that, situation, that was something we didn't expect. I would say the Victorian woman also felt out of place and uncomfortable. Since then, I've been back to compete in 2 other beard competitions using different characters, and now have a somewhat comfort level within that community. But yeah, the first time was a little, little unsettling, I should say.
Right. I was just thinking about the straight razor. Wouldn't you get like 15 minutes to practice? Just dive on in, right? There was a comment too, following up on Lori's question about the man taking the Victorian woman's hair at the end of the wrestling match, which you did. The Victorian woman did win. I think the comment was, it felt like reality. They say women win, but we also don't. Women win, but they can't. I don't know if you had any comments on that.
So again, looking at this in a larger context, and again, when this was shot, so that piece was made in 2012. It was also before the U2 movement. And so in, this idea of the man and the glass ceiling and, women having to put up with unwanted advances in the workplace and, just overall gender discrimination, both in and out of the workplace, even gender discrimination in the home, domestic violence, all of that comes into play. And so I think, of course, the pieces are meant to be absurd, and there is a contest, and there is clearly a winner and a loser, and that's not what happens in real life. But I think that gender, as an issue, and gender equality or equal rights, for everybody is still something that is current and present. And although I feel like with the U2 movement, we made a lot of progress, there's still, some work to be done as well.
All right, thank you. I think that maybe kind of will lead us into this other question about the Victorian woman's dress. How are, this idea of how women are limited and defined by clothing, and also the absurdity of women's clothing and decoration on the body. And I think there was some real specific reasons why you chose the Victorian woman for this, correct?
Yes. So the Victorian woman is really a paradox. If you look historically, what was going on at the time with that attire, it was also the time of the suffragette movement. And so, women were trying to attain the right to vote. But that outfit in particular is very uncomfortable and confining. So it's also very modest, which was also part of it. So, it's buttoned up to the neck, it's long sleeves, it's, goes down to the ankle. So the idea is that no part of the body is shown outside of the face. And underneath, there's all kinds of things going on underneath, which are also not very comfortable. So that idea of the corset, which was to constrict breathing, I had read, when I was doing research for this, I had read accounts. I mean, there was the girdle, and now today we have Spanx. And if you've ever worn a Spanx, it is, you can't breathe. There is no way you are breathing through your diaphragm if you were wearing a Spanx. So that's the modern corset. But with the original corsets, they would be so tight that, women would do permanent damage to their, rib cage and their abdominal, ability to breathe properly. Yes, where you see, people fainting and things like that. Also lots of petticoats. And so there are many, many layers. And so this was, designed to be ornamental. In terms of the particular costume that I got, I bought it at a costume shop. And although the design is authentic Victorian, the material, it was made out of some gross synthetic material that probably would have caught on fire. I don't think it was flame proof. It was rayon or something. And the wig, although it said it was a Victorian wig in the packaging, if you look at traditional Victorian hairstyles, it was not. It was more like, it looked like an Annie Oakley, wig or something. So I was playing on this idea of kitsch and, the fake versus real, because it was in no way completely authentic. And it would also be something that it was completely ridiculous to try and do these very exhausting physical actions dressed like that. You saw her hat came off immediately when she started wrestling. The wig pretty much stayed on, which was kind of amazing. I didn't expect that. But part of that is so that Victorian time, which was also, the outward appearance of being very modest, and having everything covered, but that also there were, these secret lives that were going on, behind the scenes that nobody talked about.
Yeah, I think I love that visual of her wrestling in that dress, because those outfits were not made to be, I mean, women would like sit in them, really is what they were made for. It's great. Okay, we do have a couple more questions. Okay, in bearding, when he handed her the razor, I saw it entirely differently as a comment. How did you make that specific decision?
Well, I think that goes back to consent and complicity, right? Because it was important. She couldn't, again, it was important to the concept of the piece that she wasn't just taking, that he was giving, even if it was reluctantly. So he was giving consent and permission, and also being complicit in his, the stripping away of his masculinity, symbolically from his beard. And so that I think was really a key moment to show those two ideas.
And then another question, I think we can expand a little bit on history. The question is, why was the woman Victorian? And I think there's a lot of, parts of the Victorian era that play into this. I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I had done one Victorian woman piece, which was a few years prior with a different costume, which was more authentic. But that was based off of a 1901 Thomas Edison film called Gordon's Sisters Boxing. And it was these two female boxers that toured vaudeville dressed like that, and there was this backdrop, and so again I was thinking about woman as spectacle, specifically spectacle for men's desire, or for the entertainment of men, and so the Victorian, and so the second aspect of that, so I had already been thinking about the Victorian woman as a symbol, and what that meant as a way to playfully deconstruct gendered stereotypes. And then when I moved to Texas, the reason why I kept her as a Victorian woman, but updated her look to make it look more absurd, more kitschy, more decorative, so to speak, less authentic, is that it specifically had to do with the suffragette movement in England at the time of the Victorian woman. So I felt like that was a key historical moment where her character made sense to like bring her back. In a sense, she skipped through time and landed in our current time to kind of talk about these issues today.
All right. I have another question that's not necessarily related to the content of the video, but I know you talked a little bit about, you started these in 2012, where YouTube culture wasn't quite what it is now. And I was just curious if being a video and performance artist, if that has changed a lot over the last, 8-10 years when digital access to video has become so prominent within our culture.
Well, so probably if you ask a YouTube channelist, they probably wouldn't identify as a performance artist, would be my guess. And so there's certainly, I think, people in terms of the idea of branding and using social media as a branding technique. And I would say, I'm for me personally as an artist, I'm not interested in doing that kind of work. So you probably noticed that, by the time we got to bearding, which was, there was 6 years in between, the filmmaking was a lot stronger. And so I had been collaborating with Richard Bailey for the past, I think, five years. And he is a very talented filmmaker and works on his own projects. And so we really started approaching the work as telling a story. And I'm not opposed to I don't typically put my work on YouTube. I do have a Vimeo account, and I'll put in on my website, and I'll put trailers of the work. But part of that is, I'm trying to, because I'm showing it in museums and galleries and in film festivals, it's not really being made for, to show on social media in that way. I certainly think with the invention of, as the technology of video has become so advanced, it's made it, that's the cool thing. It's a very democratic medium. Almost everybody has access to those materials to make a moving images and to edit it. And I think that that's really exciting as a tool for self-expression and communication.
Thank you. I think just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, we can still take a couple more questions for Colette to answer. Let's see, I probably had some more. I know we've talked a little bit about these ideas of absurdity before, but maybe you could expand on that, like the use of absurdity, the use of humor, and how you use it as a tool within your work.
Well, I am, a lot of my work, the underlying ideas that are not funny at all, right? They're serious things that are affecting all of us as humans in this world. And, not all of my work is funny. I certainly have made projects that are, very serious. But I do find that humor is an effective tool in order to engage an audience. And then if you get your audience engaged, you can begin to dissect and decode and have a conversation where people are not feeling polarized or defensive. And so, by using myself, and I'm making fun of myself and the character within this as well, can begin to have a conversation about like who came up with these rules about gender and these gender norms. And I think certainly my work is inspired by Dada, and those artists were making work that was responding to the atrocities of World War I, and using absurdity as a way to question atrocity. And so I am very interested in, I feel like my work aligns certainly with that movement a lot. I'm very inspired by those artists.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I agree. There's parts about your videos that I find humorous, but yeah, the subject matter is very serious, and I love that idea that we can start looking at these ideas and talking about them more through your work. I don't think we have any other questions coming in. I don't know if you had any other comments or I want to say congratulations again for being the recipient of the Kevin Mullins Memorial Award, which was really focused on artists who work within the community. So maybe we can wrap up with a little bit of a discussion about your community work, because I know you're very involved.
Sure. For the past 9 years, I have been a volunteer with an organization called Traffic 911. And they're a nonprofit with the focus of, ending sex trafficking for youth. So Texas is number 2 in the country for sex trafficking minors. And the organization, my primary role has been as a volunteer advocate. So I have spoken to many, many different groups in the community, social service organizations, schools, churches, first line responders, training first line responders on what to look for. And then at the organization, there's a whole team of advocates that are working directly with kids from the ages, typically it's their ages 11 to 17 or 18, helping them transition from victim to survivor. And then I have another outreach that I'm very passionate about, and it's working in the juvenile detention facilities, volunteering with the incarcerated girls with teaching them dance therapy. And so there have been scientific studies that have shown that dance and movement, specifically dance-based movement, is a great way to heal trauma. And so besides it's fun. So I have danced my entire life. I'm not a professional dancer, but certainly have used dance in my performance practice at times. But it's very rewarding to be in there, and the girls look forward to it. I also correspond with them because I go in once a month. So since it's COVID, they haven't seen me. We've been sending cards to make sure, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. I also found that they didn't have enough books there. So I did a big book drive, and there were over $6,000 of books were donated and purchased young adult books for their library. And so that was really cool. So yeah, I am very passionate about the issue, but also having a way to meaningfully connect to kids who just have had really difficult lives this far.
All right. Thank you. That is really wonderful. Thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you for being with us today and talking more about your piece and giving us a little bit more insight into your larger body of work. I think that's all we have.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you for everybody who joined us. Appreciate you taking the time in your busy day to join us and ask such great questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, again, thank you to everyone who logged in and for the questions. I thought some really good, insightful comments and thoughts from our audience. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. And hopefully we will see you all again. All right. Thank you, Colette.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.